He found her at the edge of his land, lying half dead under an old oak tree, barefoot, wrapped in a bloodied cloth that looked more like an old feed sack than something meant for skin. Her body was bruised in colors a man should never see on a woman. Her hair was tangled, matted with sweat and dust, and her breathing barely there. Tom Halbrook had seen plenty of bad in his time. He'd fought in a war that stole more from him than it gave. He'd buried a wife too young and a daughter too sweet for this world. But nothing, not war, not loss, not 30 years of ranch life prepared him for this. He dismounted in one swift motion. His boots hit the dirt, and before he could even call out, her eyes opened. Just a crack. She looked straight at him, past him, almost like she was seeing something that hadn't happened yet. And then she whispered, "He'll kill you just like that." No name, no context, just fear. Raw and cold, bleeding out through her voice. Tom didn't ask who. He didn't have to. There were only a handful of men in this county capable of leaving someone like this. And only one of them lived close enough to dump her here. The wind kicked up a little, sending a swirl of dust around them. Tom looked down at her. This broken stranger left a rot in the dirt like a sick animal. Without a word, he bent down and gathered her into his arms. She didn't flinch, didn't struggle, just let her head fall against his chest like it wasn't the first time. The ride back was slow, careful. Tom had seen wild calves in better shape, but still she held on. By the time he laid her on the spare bed in his cabin, the sun had nearly gone. He cleaned the wounds the best he could, using old army tricks and cleaner than he usually spared. But even as her body rested, her words stuck to the walls like smoke. "He'll kill you." Tom had always kept to himself. Didn't stir trouble, didn't play hero, but there was something about that voice, about the way she said it, that told him trouble was already on its way. And this time he couldn't just ride the fence. So who was she? And what in God's name had he just stepped into? Tom didn't sleep much that night. He sat in the rocking chair, eyes fixed on the back room where she lay. The wind outside scraped across the walls like a warning, but he stayed put, watching the fire die down inch by inch. She stirred in her sleep, whispered things he couldn't make out. Not words really, just sounds. But every now and then, one name cut through the haze like a knife. Earl. By morning, she was awake or close to it, eyes open, but cloudy. He brought her a bowl of broth, a clean cloth. She nodded faintly. When she tried to speak, her voice cracked like old wood. Tom didn't push, just listen, like always. Later that day, she found the strength to sit up. Her eyes scanned the room like she didn't believe it was real. That's when Tom opened the cedar chest, pulled out a dress. Old but clean, belonged to his wife. Long gone now. Fever took her 6 years back. It was quick. One day she had a chill. By the next week she was under the cottonwood out back. He laid the dress on the bed, said nothing. She looked at it, then at him. And something in her face shifted, a little less fear, a little more something else. That evening she spoke more clearly, not just about what happened, about what she saw. There was a boy once, a ranch hand, maybe 16. Earl caught him talking to her that same night. The boy vanished. No goodbye, no word. Folks assumed he'd run off, but Clara knew better. She heard digging late at night. Heard Earl curse under his breath. Heavy footsteps behind the barn 2 nights later. She went out back, found the old well boarded up. It hadn't been used in years, but now it was sealed shut with rusted nails and a fresh lock. She never asked, never said a word, until now. Tom sat there, hands clenched tight. Not out of surprise, but because deep down he already knew Earl was that kind of man. And now he couldn't ignore it. And this wasn't just about saving her anymore. This was about what that land was hiding. If that well really held a body, what else had Earl buried out there? Clara had only been at Tom's place a few days. But something about the air felt different. Quieter maybe, like the ranch itself knew something was about to happen. And it did. Late afternoon, sun still hanging high, baking the dirt into stone. Tom was fixing a broken latch on the chicken coop when he heard hooves on dry ground. Slow, heavy, not like someone visiting, more like someone coming to collect. Earl, he didn't knock, just rode straight up to the porch, dismounted, and stood like he owned the land. Tom didn't say a word, just stepped out into the yard and met him eye to eye. Earl spit in the dirt, looked past Tom toward the house. She hear Tom said nothing. Earl's face twisted. She's my wife and I'm taking her home. That's when Clara stepped out. The dress hung loose on her frame, but she stood tall, not shaky, not silent. Not anymore. You ain't taking me anywhere, Earl. He blinked like he couldn't believe she'd spoken back. Then he moved fast. Too fast. Before Tom could step in, Earl had grabbed her by the arm, yanked her forward, and raised his hand to strike. But he didn't get far. Tom's hand shot out, caught Earl's wrist midair to TW, and twisted it behind his back in one clean move. The sound of bones cracking wasn't loud, but it was enough. Earl cursed, stumbled, and backed off. Folks nearby had started gathering by the fence. They didn't say anything, but they watched. And this time, they didn't look away. Tom stepped between Earl and Clara. You come back here. It won't go easy. Earl scowled, rubbed his wrist, then got back on his horse. This ain't over. Then go home and think real hard about how you want it to end. Earl rode off, dust in his wake, but something in the air had shifted. Tom looked back at Clara. She wasn't crying. She was breathing steady like a storm had passed and something stronger had been left behind it. This story's been keeping you close to the screen. Maybe hit that little subscribe button. We're just getting started. 2 days later, just after dawn, the quiet ranch life cracked open again. Earl came back, not alone this time. He had 2 men with him, both rough around the edges. Worse yet, he wasn't just angry, he was armed. Tom saw the dust rising before he saw the men. He didn't panic. He just stepped down from the porch and waited. Clara stood inside, peeking through the curtain, her hands clenched tight. Earl stopped a few yards out. He didn't bother with pleasantries. You had no right to keep her here. She belongs to me. She's my wife. Tom didn't flinch. You've had your say. Now you can leave. Earl barked a laugh. She's mine. And if I have to drag her out by her hair, I will. That's when a voice called out from behind the barn. You'll be dragging nothing today, Earl. It was Sheriff Bennett. He stepped into view, flanked by 2 deputies, rifles across their backs. Tom hadn't said much to the sheriff, just sent word 2 nights ago after Clara told him about the well. What the sheriff had found that night changed everything behind Earl's ranch where an old well had been boarded up. They found something, a boot, and under it bones. Human ones. No one said the name out loud, but everyone in town remembered the ranch hand who went missing a year back. 16. Quiet boy, worked hard, disappeared like smoke. Now there was proof. Sheriff Bennett didn't ask questions. Earl Whitmore, you're under arrest on suspicion of murder. You're coming with us. Earl froze for the first time. He looked uncertain, but the men with him backed away. They weren't paid enough for this. He started to argue, stopped himself, then cursed under his breath as the cuffs clicked shut. Clara stepped outside slowly. No knife this time, just watching. The sheriff gave her a nod. Nothing needed to be said. Around the ranch, neighbors had begun to gather. This time, they didn't turn their backs. They didn't pretend not to see. Tom stood beside Clara, steady and solid. Justice had arrived, not because it was easy, but because someone finally stood up. But when a man opens his heart after years of silence, what happens next is never simple. Life slowed down after Earl was taken away but not in the empty kind of way. More like the kind of quiet that comes after a long storm where things still creak, where the air still holds the weight of what happened. But you start to breathe again. Tom didn't ask Clara to stay and she didn't ask to leave. Days turned into weeks. She helped out around the ranch, fed the chickens, brushed down the horses, and every evening she took time to walk behind the house to the cottonwood tree. She'd sit there for a while, quiet, just thinking. Tom never intruded, but one day, she came back inside holding a flower she'd picked near the grave of Tom's wife. I hope she doesn't mind me being here, Clara said. Tom just smiled. She would have liked you. Neither of them said anything more than that, but sometimes the strongest things don't need many words. Claire started working with the smallest horse on the ranch, a nervous little mare that no one could get near. She'd bring it apples, talk to it in a soft voice, took her time. After a while, the horse started to come closer, nudge her hand, rest its head on her shoulder. Tom watched from the porch, knew exactly what that meant. Sometimes we think we're broken for good. That no one can get close without hurting us. That maybe we're too far gone to be worth fixing. But maybe all we need is someone who doesn't push. Someone who listens and stays. So what would you have done if you were Ohm? Would you have brought her home? Would you have looked away like everyone else? And what about Clara? How many people out there are still trying to heal from something no one else sees? Something they were never allowed to speak of. If this story sat with you for a bit longer than expected, If it reminded you something you've seen or felt, go ahead and like this video and maybe subscribe. We've got more stories to tell. Some wild, some quiet, but all of them worth sitting down for, because sometimes the right story at the right time is exactly what someone out there needs. And maybe today that someone was